All right, all right, all right. What is up, my fellow nerds and gangsters? Welcome to the Spiffy Nerd Herder channel. Starting a couple segundos early today. Um, I'm excited to talk about this movie because it's awesome. I mean, Captain America: Winter Soldier is certainly. Ooh, what's up, iPad? It's I think, one of the best Marvel films. So yesterday we talked. I watched, and maybe some of you guys watched, the first Captain America, and today, while I was working, I watched Captain America: Winter Soldier, and I primarily was watching it for the purpose of identifying the key differences between the Russo brothers' style and Joe Johnston's style, because they are vastly different, yet we are seeing a movie portrayed in the same universe with the same characters, with some new characters, of course. But I think it's really worthwhile to see the differences in how they did all that. So, let me know if you've seen the movie. I'll dose of you right now. And who do we got? Who's here? Um, let's see here. I'm gonna make sure I'm getting a good stream going here by turning off my iPad and stuff. Okay, because my wife is also streaming right now, and well, it can't get in the way of that. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so the first thing that I noticed first and foremost in watching Winter Soldier is the difference in how the Russo brothers directed action. In the first Captain America, the action is it's very simple, it's very straightforward. There's a lot of cool parts. Of course, the throwing the shield is something that was invented there. They take it to like the nth degree in Winter Soldier, kind of that boomerang effect that Steve does with the shield. But what I really noticed is that the action is much more inventive. But not only that, because that's kind of a choreography thing, the way it was shot was super, super clear. So when a director, in my mind, one of the hardest things to do while you're directing action is not only making it exciting, but also just making it clear, especially when you're doing hand-to-hand fighting. So my mentor is a guy named Simon Crane. He's a big-time second unit director. I mean, look him up. If there's a big movie in the last 10 years, he was basically the second unit director. And what a second unit director does is he or she will direct usually action scenes or scenes that don't have the main characters or scenes that are very specialized, and all of the above or just one of those. Sometimes they do have the main characters, but oftentimes they are action scenes. And what he said, and he directed Jason Bourne. He's second unit directed Jason Bourne, and so a lot of fighting. And what he told me is basically you treat every move of a fight like it is a dance, and you develop each camera movement for that particular dance move. And so what I noticed for Winter Soldier is that when the Russo brothers, they went wide when they wanted to show something cool, and or medium when they wanted to show something, but they only went into close-ups for things that were more self-explanatory, like a punch landing or something like that. You could always follow what was going on in the action at any given moment, which I thought was extremely, extremely powerful. I mean, what do you guys think of Winter Soldier? Let me know for sure. Um, and so the action is, way more inventive in this film too. The second thing I really liked, and this isn't quite a difference in directing technique, but I liked how they gave us a recap of the first Captain America. When Steve goes to the Smithsonian and basically checks out the exhibit that is all about him. I mean, it's kind of cool, but it gives an entire 2-minute recap of what happened in the first movie, how he came to be, how he has all his powers, who Bucky Barnes is, which obviously is paid off massively, not only with the reveal of who the Winter Soldier is, but also when Bucky himself goes to the Smithsonian to basically find out who he is in the post credit scene. So I thought that was pretty awesome. I thought it was a very inventive way of how to give us a recap of the first film. One of the things I talked about in when we talked about Armageddon is when Bruce Willis's team finds out about the asteroid that's coming to the Earth. They get to NASA, they're super excited, and then we just cut into the room where they're putting their face in their hands, and we know what they've been told just by their reactions. We as the audience already know that asteroid is coming to the Earth, so we don't need to hear it said yet again. But in this particular instance, so the reason I mentioned that is because I made a big deal of you don't tell your audience something they already know. Now in this instance, because it is a sequel, it's a totally separate film, you do got to do that because Marvel and Kevin Feige, they full well know that people may be watching The Winter Soldier that maybe have never seen the first Captain America. So you got to always fill in the blanks. And each Marvel film kind of does this in different ways to give us a recap of kind of what's going on in the universe at that time. And so I thought this was just a clever way. It's not a conversation like, oh, well, let me tell you what's happened, But it kind of shows us how far Steve has come also. And what I did like about the directing style is that they did make Steve a little bit edgier. He's a little bit more jaded, but he's still kind of that I always do the right thing mentality. But he's just a little bit more of a realist while maintaining his sense of idealism. I know it's kind of a contradiction, oxymoron, but it's also, I think, pretty powerful for his character that they took him and made him a little bit more, even more relatable to us. We all try to relate to the goodness that is in Steve, but they made him so that, he wants a little bit more out of his life. There's that, he's super selfless, but there's just a part of him that's like, well, what if I wasn't doing this? What would my life be like? And that finally brings me to my biggest thing that I noticed is we talked, I think last night, about a character's want and their need. A character's want is something that they straight up just want. You didn't realize I was streaming that, Cold Taco, because you were watching Netflix? Man, that's disappointing. But welcome. I can always count on you to be here. Have you seen Captain America Winter Soldier? That's what I want to know. Because if you haven't, well, you got to be like the Death Disc guy in Attack of the Clones and go home and rethink your life. So what I was just talking about is the idea of want versus need for characters. We talked a little bit about it the other day with Captain America yesterday. So in the first Captain America, his want was to be with Peggy. He wants to be, he wants to be loved. He wants to be accepted, but he wants Peggy. But he needs to put down the big, bomber into the ice so that he saves everybody's life. But by doing so, that means that he will not be with Peggy. All right, that Gold Taco says, I watched Winter Soldier in between classes today, and I prefer the other Captain America movie. Really? Okay. I want to know why. I assume you mean the first Captain America movie, not the third Captain America, which is Civil War, which we're not watching for the watch list. But what did you like about the first Captain America that made you prefer Winter Soldier? Because I like Winter Soldier a little bit better. I'm very curious to know. But of course, it's film. Doesn't really matter. It's all subjective. There's nothing is truly good. It's just if you like it or not. But okay, so those are the wants and needs of Steve in the first film. But in the second film, his wants and needs are a little bit different. Peggy's gone. Well, not she's gone, but she's got dementia, Alzheimer's, and you could tell that he kind of pulls a notebook and he goes and talks to her frequently, but she is constantly not remembering him. So you can tell that he's letting go of that because he can't hold on to it anymore. It's too painful, and it's also she moved on with her life. She married somebody else. So his want is no longer Peggy in The Winter Soldier. It's not his need either. But when we don't really discover what his want versus need is until we discover what's going down in Chinatown with the Winter Soldier, that he is Bucky, his best friend. And what I liked, let me just jump into some comments here. So that old taco, your movie watch list is saving me because my video production teacher wants my class to watch old French movies. Is he having you watch the Battle of Algiers? Tell me that. Is he? I think that's in French. I think so. I really like the story in the first Captain America. It's got a great story. Dennis Barrick says, I prefer the Winter Soldier over the first Captain America. So why do you prefer Winter Soldier over the first Captain America? That old taco? A little bit of vice versa there. Reverse. She liked the first one over the Winter Soldier. Okay, so with the so what I was saying about his want and need is when he realizes that Bucky is the Winter Soldier, his want and need are now clashing again. He wants more than anything to save his friend, but if he keeps his friend alive, that friend who doesn't know he's Bucky anymore will stop at nothing to kill and stop Stephen from frustrating Hydra's plan. And so he's got a big contradiction here. He can save his friend and potentially fail his entire mission, or he can kill his friend, shank him like, it's Alcatraz Islands in the 60s, or he can, so if he shanks his friend, then of course he's successful. But it's Captain America, so he figures out a way to do both. What I did like about the film is that there's the big climax where he successfully disables the 3 gunships that are basically targeting 1 million people at once. But that's not the climax. That's the climax for the plot, but it's not the climax for Steve as a character. The climax for Steve as a character is when he goes back down to save Bucky, who is trapped under a big scaffolding. And so I really liked that we had the plot climax, but that wasn't still the climax of the film, because the climax of your character is always the climax of your story, generally at least. Abdi Muhammad, what's up, man? Same. So I assume you're saying that you preferred Winter Soldier over the first Captain America. That cool taco, I asked if she was supposed to watch Battle of Algiers, which if you guys have never seen it, definitely watch it. It's a stellar film. Old school. I think it was made in the 60s. But she says she doesn't know. Well, that's disappointing. I don't know if it's on Netflix or Hulu. Okay, but Dennis says, love the character development of Winter Soldier and the relationships. Great villain. I particularly enjoyed that as well. I liked the little banter between Natasha and Steve throughout the film too. One of the things I really liked is they had the running conversation throughout the entire film talking about who Steve can ask out, and there's a little bit of sexual tension between him and Natasha, which is basically at the end they essentially decide, no, and so it kind of just subtly answers that question of why do they never get together, and so I liked his character development. So one of the first things I was mentioning is that in this difference between directors, where we got the Joe Johnston, and he was very much focused, because it was a story, very much focused on Steve's wholesome persona, that he only wanted to do what was right for others. But now in the second film, he still has that. He's still game with that, but he's also exploring what does he want as a character. What does he need as a character? So there is that. I use the term the selfish side, but not in a negative connotation. And so I kind of like that development in his character of what is making Steve tick now that he's not in the 1940s. Now that Peggy is not there. Now that Bucky is gone, as far as he knows. What is making him tick? What is driving him forward? Because even, when he talks to the Falcon, he basically insinuates that he's thinking about getting out of active service. So Abdi says, by the way, I think they should have went more into Hydra in Winter Soldier. How so? I thought they went into Hydra quite a bit. You had a little short Nazi dude. I can't remember his name, even though I watched the movie a few hours ago. Uh, and you had Secretary Pierce and stuff like that. So you kind of get the breadth of the scope of the entire organization. What I would have liked to have seen in regards to Hydra is specifically a little bit more about Red Skull. And they kind of just say he's gone. It started with him, but now it's not him. I would have liked to have seen that a little bit more. They did go into how the United States recruited a bunch of scientists from all over the world to come work for him, and because they were covert Hydra agents, they infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought that was nice. The lore. Okay, so you're saying the lore. So I am a noob when it comes to deep lore of Marvel comics. I'm not. I read Star Wars comics just because I'm a Star Wars nut, but I haven't really gotten into Marvel comics. So I don't know much of the lore. My knowledge of the lore is just basically what's in the MCU films. So, what type of lore did you want to see, I guess? Let me know that. Because I'm curious. I'm curious what is Hydra that we have not seen in the movies. And so, let me see here. So one of the things I do that I learned from the Script Notes podcast by John August and blanking on the other dude's name, but go to bed. Is that whenever he's watching a film, he takes notes. So we got Captain America, Winter Soldier. There's basically every time I watch a movie, I take notes. So Contagion was from the other night because then I can go back and reference them. Then I don't have to go back and watch a movie potentially to see something. I can just go back to my notes like, oh, I think Contagion did something like this. Let me see if I wrote it down in my notes. It also, the reason John August does it, and if you don't listen to the podcast Script Notes, I highly recommend it. It's really great. It's by two guys who are active writers. John August wrote Big Fish. The other guy, sorry, I'm blanking on his name. He wrote most recently Chernobyl, the miniseries, and won a bunch of awards for that. But when you take notes from every film you watch, even as it's just at the very end, you can jot some notes down. Then you don't fall into the trap, or I don't fall into the trap of thinking of trying to emulate the last film you saw. So a lot of times, like let's say the last film I saw was Inception, and so now I'm working on a film about X, Y, and Z, and I can only think about Inception because it's the one freshest in my mind. But with all the notes from all the films I'm watching, I can go back to them, and so it kind of prevents me from being stuck on the most recent film I saw. Okay, so Dennis says, every character is so solid. Captain America, Natasha, Bucky, Falcon, all great. Sam Jackson, and Robert Redford. Yeah, I like how I liked Natasha's character a lot in this film. I am anxious to see, we've never really gotten much of her backstory. We've gotten very, very little, so I'm anxious to see more of that. And more, I still, even now, even after seeing all these films, I still don't know what makes Natasha tick, So I'm very interested to see her backstory. Because I don't love her character, because I don't know much about her, and so it makes it hard for me. But it was refreshing in this film to see her as as a person, because when we first got introduced to her in Iron Man 2, I think it was, she was just this undercover secretary that what's his face had the hots for, and then she fights, and randomly she's really cool. So I want to learn more about her. But Bucky, we totally got a lot with. With Bucky, it creates a lot of questions more than it even answers. Which when you're setting up a third film, that's right. But Sam Jackson, we got a lot. Falcon, I particularly like the development of Falcon and Captain America. Okay, so Abdi says, I'm casually a Marvel fan. I just wanted to see more of the lore because I watched a lore Marvel vid and found it interesting. Cool, that's fair, man. Yeah, I mean, what I'm most interested about Hydra is just how deep does it permeate, and who is the ultimate leader of it? Of course, we started with the Red Skull, but in this instance, is it Secretary Pierce? Is he the leader of Hydra? Is it the AI doctor? Is he the leader of it? And he seemed to be destroyed. It wouldn't make sense if he were destroying himself by the missile strike. Okay, so Dennis says, I'm afraid to see Black Widow's backstory. I like her being mysterious, but I still can't wait to see her movie. I'm with you there. It's like Darth Vader. I mean, Darth Vader and Natasha Romanoff are not even in the same league, but, with Darth Vader, it was the mystery of his backstory that made him so interesting. I do like his backstory. I like the story of Anakin Skywalker. But with Natasha, that's true. Seeing her backstory could, if it's not good, it could kind of ruin things. But the biggest thing like I said, the biggest thing I want to see is what makes Natasha tick. Why does she do what she does? Why is she not a Russian asset anymore? Why all of these things? I just want to know more about what motivates her as a character, because I still just don't know. Maybe I'm just missing something. All right, Hydra spreads all the way to Gary Shandling. Who's Gary Shandling? Is he the senator? Is that who that is? Tell me. Because we got that senator. All right, so let's see here. What are some other notes that I had? There were a few little moments, just filmmaking wise, that I liked. I think in general the Russo brothers are much more. They were a little more creative with their camera work. For instance, when they kind of make it a big deal about that this guy has a mask on, you never hear him speak, and when he's fighting with Cap and the mask falls down, we get a nice close-up insert of the mask hitting the ground. And so it's setting us up for the big reveal of seeing who this guy's face is. So it's really great. Okay, so Gary Shandling is the senator. Is he in any of the other MCU films? I can't remember. I mean, who can keep track all 27 films or however many there are? Maybe you can enlighten us. But I liked that reveal of the mask and who his identity was. And so even though they had spent the entire film of obscuring his face, they still made a meal out of that moment when the mask hits the ground in its own shot and then to reveal who he is. So it kind of teaches me that, don't be afraid of doing stuff like that. Don't be afraid of, when you have a reveal, setting it up in the moment right before it, too. A very common tactic to do this is like when somebody reveals something, you get the reaction of the character seeing it first, and then you see what he's actually seeing, and we as the audience learn what he's actually seeing. So it was kind of a moment of that. Another part that I liked, just filmically, is when they visit the military base in New Jersey where Cap, was made, basically, where he first trained. And he sees a memory. So we've seen a lot of different ways to do flashbacks. Of course, there's just the stereotypical, no, I shouldn't say stereotypical, but the most common way is to just show it. We see what happened. Like, for instance, the easiest thing to do here for the Russo brothers would have been just to use footage from the first film of him training, of him diving on the grenade, of all of these different things. But they chose to do it a lot more creatively. And honestly, using flashback, just using existing footage would have been the cheapest way to do it. But for our purposes, as filmmakers who are, not making $200 million films, they chose to put the characters from the past right in there in front of Steve. Kind of similar to how we did the flashback in Shards of the Past, where just Padme and Anakin were in front of Vader. He wasn't transported to a new location. The characters were more transported to him. So it's like a reverse flashback or memory. And so they brought... Gary Shandling is in Iron Man 2. That's right. Gracias. Thank you very much. That's right. He gets in the whole tiff with him. Okay. So I'm talking about the memory. And Echo Taco says, was that a memory vision or something that the real Captain America saw when he was at the military base? So when he's at the military base and he sees himself, from 60 years ago. He sees himself training. He sees himself running with the drill sergeant. But what I liked is they brought all the characters from the past and just put it right in front of them. They just put them in the modern day. They really didn't do anything snazzy with it. Excuse me. But I thought it was a really clever way to portray what he was remembering, and frankly, kind of a pretty cheap way. All you got to do is pay for costumes for that. But I thought it was pretty cool. So yes, it was definitely a memory that Captain America was seeing. He was just remembering his training, because he was made there, as he said. What are some of your guys' favorite parts of this film? I mean, there's plenty of action stuff. There's great story elements with the characters and everything. The hand-to-hand combat scene between the Winter Soldier, and Steve, or Captain America, the one that reveals who Bucky is or who the Winter Soldier is honestly one of the best hand-to-hand combat fights I've ever seen. I really like that. Okay. Also, was the first part of the Shards of the Past up until we see Vader in his chamber, a vision. Oh, now we're getting the Shards of the Past stuff. So in Shards of the Past, the first bit all the way up until we see his chamber is a Force vision. Now, the progenitor of that Force vision, though, is Sidious. Sidious was the one who caused Vader to see all of that. And to live it, basically. And so Sidious, Granddaddy Sidious, Grandpa Palps, knows full well what Vader's thinking. He full well knows that he wants to kill him. He full well knows how Vader feels of his inadequacies and everything like that. And he wants to push Vader out of that. And so he basically shows him this vision to show what would happen. And so he's basically playing on all the feelings Vader already has and presenting it to him. So when Vader comes in and says, I'm fine, Sidious straight up knows he's lying because he knows what's going on. And so the vision originated with Palpatine, yet it's not like Vader was just seeing it. He felt like he was living it. He was making the decisions. And so Palpatine kind of facilitated the vision, and Vader filled in all the blanks. That's probably the best way to put it. Okay. All right. Does he want Vader to overthrow him? In my mind, Sidious does not, at least at the point in Shards of the Past, I don't feel that Sidious wants him to overthrow him. But what he wants Vader to realize is that he wants Vader to try. He wants Vader to gain the confidence that he has. He wants Vader to obtain the power that he knows he can have. Because if Vader is always wallowing in the past and, always so focused on Padme, then Vader will never achieve the power that he needs. And so we'll get into this a lot more between the dynamic of Sidious and Vader in the next episodes for Vader. So I probably can't go into too much more. But I know Star Wars Theory and I have kind of already said these things in other chats. But Star Wars Theory is very into the relationship between Sidious and Vader. He knows extremely well, and so it's really fun to develop that. All right. So the elevator fight is fantastic as well. I really like the build up to that. When he gets in the elevator, he sees the guy gripping the handle of his pistol. More guys come in. Steve notices that one of them is sweating. More guys come in, and Steve has noticed that he's being basically completely surrounded by it, and surrounded by them. Excuse me. And I love the line that he says. Basically, if any of you, before we start this, if anybody wants to get out now, they can, or whatever he says. I thought it was. I love that fight. It's so good, and it's a textbook example of how to do a fight in close quarters. Because again, it's so impressive how the Russo brothers make the action so clear. So in conclusion, basically, what I felt the Russo brothers definitely took the action, and I felt they took it up a notch. They built upon the shoulders of giants basically, and took it to another level. with sequels, it's critical beyond anything else to have further character developments, and I feel like they did that with Steve. Could they have done more? Of course they could have. You could probably always do more, but I liked what they did there, and in general, I just thought it was a more fun of a film. So let's see here. I saw a few videos about Disney was using some Legend material and retconning. Well, Legends material, there's a plethora of Legends material for Star Wars. A lot of it I have not read because there's just so dang much of it. I've read, I'd say, over 90% of the canon stuff now. But but I feel like Disney, they should take from Legends on occasion. Take the good stuff from Legends, right? The idea that Palpatine was a clone and that he put his spirit into a clone body is straight from Legends. I was never a huge fan of it, but that's a video. That's a whole other topic for another video. Maybe we'll have to talk about that another time. But yeah. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed Captain America and Captain America Winter Soldier. Tomorrow is Dark Knight. The Dark Knight. So, I hope you enjoy The Dark Knight. I'm sure you've all seen that. If you haven't, though, definitely check it out. Might be on Netflix. I can't remember. I got the Blu-ray. So, check it out. We'll talk about that. There's a possibility that we may skip the stream tomorrow and then just jump in for both Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises on Friday. So, but who knows? Things can happen. So, thanks so much for joining me today, guys. And I love you guys. So, remember to, any comedies on my list, real quick. I don't have any comedies. I should get some comedies on there. There's a few that I'm debating to remove. So, you got any suggestions for comedies? I'm just looking at the list right now. I'm in Mr. Mars live stream because Survivor is on. I'll also think of some comedies because I don't know. But Dennis, if you got any ideas after this, just shoot me a message on Instagram, Spiffy Nerd Herder, and I'll see what I can do. Because we should have some comedies on this. Dumb and Dumber. All right, guys, stay spiffy. Don't do anything I wouldn't do twice.